Welcome to Time to Teach with Tammy, the podcast that gives tips, advice, and suggestions to teachers by a real teacher. So sit back and enjoy. And oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe. We're back. Welcome to episode 71 of Time to Teach. Today's episode is entitled Managing Stress and Anxiety in the Classroom. So this is definitely not a topic that I have not discussed before. I've discussed this. I'm not sure if I've given it its own episode before, but I've definitely discussed this in other episodes. I'm probably really not going to say anything too new on this. But at the time that I'm recording, it is the end of November. So really this is not going to go out until much later, but still it's really around this time and ongoing forward that I notice, is where things feel more stressful and there's a lot more things to be anxious about. There's always stress and always anxiety, but I don't know, something that I always notice is, when you first start the school year, yes, there's some anxiety going into a new school year, but it's different. It's new, it's fresh, everyone's happy and excited. And then you hit around, November, December, and things are getting real. Things feel real now. So that's why I thought this would be a perfect timing to go ahead and do this episode and talk about this topic. So let's go ahead and get started. I would like to say, obviously if you're dealing with things, you want to seek professional help, and I am not that. I am just me. I'm just me with a mic. I'm just going to be sharing kind of ways and things that I manage the stress and any type of anxieties that come my way. But yeah, definitely if you're dealing with things that are difficult and it's, ongoing and you're having a difficult time, please do seek professional help. All I'm really doing is just sharing the things that I do, what seems to work for me. So that's kind of my disclaimer before we go in. Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead and get started with today's episode. So like I said, it's usually around this time of the school year where I notice that things just seem to get a little bit more intense. Not that there's any time in the school year where there's not some kind of intensity. I just feel like we work in that kind of field where there's always some kind of intensity. There's super stressful things. I mean, whenever you're working very close with humans, on very big and important things, and yes, educating humans is a very important thing. You're going to encounter stress, you're going to encounter conflicts, you're going to encounter, just different beliefs of how things should be done. So there's a lot to go wrong. There's a lot to go wrong in this field. So it's not all happy-go-lucky, which I just remember when I was first becoming a teacher and you hear people's warnings about teaching, like you just hear them. I remember I had a friend whose son at that time talked about wanting to be a teacher. He was still in school, and how she was really trying to dissuade him and no, you're going to be poor your whole life, which I'm not saying it's not true. And also like just running into teachers along the way who are like, yeah, at this point, I if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't do it. So you go in kind of knowing that there's something about the profession that is a little dark. Boy, that sounds really, really dark. I don't mean it that way, but you know that you're going into something that some people have some negative feelings about, because either because they've experienced it firsthand or just what they know of the profession. But you still go in thinking things are going to be great for me. This is, yeah, I'm going to be the one who like makes this work. And then reality hits you like a ton of bricks, and you realize that, hey, yeah, you know those warnings they gave me, yeah, now I understand why. Yeah, they were kind of right about some of that stuff. Not to speak bad about our profession, I love what I do, I love teaching, but reality is reality, and the reality is, as my mom used to like to tell me multiple times, many times throughout my life, life is not a bowl of cherries. Well, the teaching profession also works in this with this thing. Teaching is not a bowl of cherries. You have your good moments, you have your nice, sweet moments, and then you have those moments when you're hitting the pit of the cherry. Got to spit that out because that can be bad. So that's, yeah, I mean, it's not all fun and games. Although there's a lot of fun in games, it's not all fun and games. I feel like it's usually around this time of the school year where, students who maybe you were suspicious of maybe struggling with things, maybe there being an underlying issue, not issue in a bad way, but maybe there's some thing that needs to be looked at. I feel like this is the time in the school year where it's like, okay, now we really need to move on that and get that looked at a little more deeper. This is the time of school year, at least for me. I've talked to you guys before about the fact that I teach a grade called pre-first. Clearly, this is not a grade that exists in the States. If you're listening in the States, might not exist outside of Mexico. I really don't know. I don't know. I just know it's not in every school here, but you see it more commonly with some of the bilingual schools, especially the American schools. It's an extra grade in between kindergarten and first grade. So, they're like the age of first graders. And at this point, they enter pre-first at like, most of them are about 5, and then they turn 6 pretty soon into the school year. You do have others who might be a little bit older, come in 6 and then start turning 7 later in the school year. I see that too. But they're young. My point is they're young. So with a young age, you can have undiagnosed learning things going on. So a lot of times we might have students enter. Some of them might have entered and they've been diagnosed and we know about it, but you've got a lot of, well, I don't want to say a lot, but you've got some undiagnosed kiddos coming in. And, at the beginning of pre-first, it's really kind of hard to distinguish how much of what you're seeing is the age, how much of what you're seeing is the transition from the early childhood section, doing things a completely different way, to the elementary section, where we now have full days, and that, like, we don't do things the way you did in early childhood. You know how you used to learn through playing all day? Well, now, yeah, that's not a thing we do here. So there's so many changes in that whole transition. And then it makes it difficult. So this is kind of the time of year where it's like, okay, there might happen a kiddo or two who we might have kind of been keeping a watchful eye on. This is the time where it's like, I really think we need to investigate this, because if it's still lingering around at this point, it's like, okay, maybe it's not quite because of the transition. Maybe there's something more to the story, and that should be looked at. So I know I would say probably in my specific situation, there's a lot more stress involved because of that, because now we have to actively work on addressing that. And it can be stressful because you don't know how parents are going to react. I mean, in my experience, most parents have been very lovely and not too difficult to work with. But like when you have to deliver some not so great news, that's not easy, because, well, it's not easy. I don't think I have to explain why it's not easy. That is not easy. So there's stress on my end because this is the time of year where that is happening. Um, and it's like I said, it's the newness of the school year has worn off, and you're just kind of left with the bitter truth of life. Just kidding. I intentionally made that one sound very dark. No, but you're left with just kind of like, okay, we're getting our groove on, and now things have come to light. And at this point in the school year, you all probably really know like which students, how to work with each student at this point, because like this is the student who's always going to question this is the student who's easygoing. Like your kids at this point. So things have come to light, and reality is what reality is. So some things to manage the stress. Don't go to work. Just kidding. Just kidding, people. That right there is what we call down here in Mexico a joke. And just kidding about that, because that's not even a Spanish word. Okay, so moving on with the actual what I do. Okay, so some things, like I said, none of this is going to be like, oh my gosh, Tammy, nobody told me this before. Where have you been all my life? It's not that. It's just things that I do and things that I've talked about. There are a couple, literally like two huge, I consider them to be huge things in my life that help to keep me grounded, help me to really manage the day-to-day difficulties of what we're doing. Number one, I've talked about this before, so this is not going to be a surprise if you are a longtime listener, but get yourself some good sleep. Good sleep. You don't have to be as ridiculous as I am. You guys know I have like an 8:30 bedtime. I like to say 8:30-ish. Well, I literally never say that. I only say 8:30. But it's 8:30-ish because there are times of the year where it's really difficult to actually keep an 8:30 bedtime, although I still keep it really close. The beginning of the school year, I'm adjusting from the summer, so it takes me a little while to actually get that down to 8:30. By this time of the school year, obviously, I am, by early fall, my body really is adjusted to that bedtime. And then this spring, when the time changes, it also becomes a little more difficult. Just because it's still light out by 8:30, and it just makes it very hard. And then I think also because then I know I'm also at the end of the school year, so I don't feel, like that same urgency as I do the rest of the school year. So those two times of the school year are a little bit difficult for me, but the rest of the year, you can bet your sweet dollar that I am in bed at 8:30. And I know that sounds ridiculous, so I'm not saying go to bed at 8:30, because if you're like me in my house, I'm the first person to sleep. But so getting really, really good sleep actually helps me, because by the next day, I feel really good. I feel rested, and I just cannot emphasize enough, you guys, how much sleep, really sleeping, will help you encounter everything that's, well, I don't want to make it seem like this is the cure-all, but definitely it's going to help you encounter the things that you need to encounter. You know, those days where you're just tired and you're in your classroom, you're preparing for the day, and you just hearing your students outside, maybe this is just me, but just hearing them, I'm like, oh man, can I do this today? Really? I don't know if I can do this. Just hearing them is difficult. So when you feel good, which is why I like to sleep, then you're like, yeah, I can take all the noise. Yeah, bring it on, buddy. I've got this. So it sounds, I don't know, it sounds probably like a stupid thing, but I promise you, getting good sleep consistently, not just, let me try that out for a night, because your body is actually probably sleep deprived. And that from studies have shown us that you actually have to, pay back that sleep before you start actually just managing the good sleep. So it makes a world of difference. It really, really does. And then my second thing is kind of related to why my early bedtime is that early and ridiculous, is really managing some time for exercise. So because I really don't feel like, for me and my schedule, it doesn't really work out to do my workout after work. I could do it. I could, if I really wanted to, I could make that happen, but clearly I don't really want to make that happen. So I get up at 4:30 in the morning. This is partly why, for me to get my full night's sleep and to feel well, this is why I need to be in bed by 8:30. But of course, if you're not getting up at 4:30 in the morning, you probably don't need to be as ridiculous with your bedtime as I do. But I get up at 4:30 and I do, a light exercise. I'm not going out there and killing it by any means. I'm gently hopping onto the elliptical and breezing through a very light workout. Sometimes I'm trying to get better at this. I use my hand weights instead and just do like a day where I'm maybe focusing on abs. You wouldn't know that by looking at me, but yeah, sometimes I do. Sometimes I do, people. And my light hand weights. So nothing outrageous, but it kind of doubles as exercise. So that time that you're really paying attention to you, and you time, or in this case, more specifically, me time. It's just something that I feel like I am more into the ritual of doing that, because really I don't think exercise, I'm not doing it to lose weight. There's something else specific I do for that. We'll talk about that in a second. So I'm not really doing it because I'm like, oh my goodness, I want to lose weight. Actually, I don't. If you're someone who's looking to lose weight, I feel like exercise is not a very helpful thing in that. But it's more like the ritual of it. It's more because I also know that exercise is healthy. You get your oxygen flowing. It's very healthy for you, not because of losing weight, but it's just a very healthy thing. So for me, I just enjoy that aspect, and I have my routine, so I can do it. For me, I have to have things built into my schedule. It has to be a routine, or it probably will never happen. This is evidenced by my lack of productivity whenever on vacation. So there's that. Okay. So good sleep, finding some time to exercise. You could probably be a little more energetic in your exercise than I am, but like I said, I'm not going out and trying to do any massive things in my workout. I'm just trying to kind of maintain good health. So for me, it's kind of light, whatever. And then my third big thing. So I said there were a couple of big things. I really should have said several because there are three. My third thing is looking at your diet. Okay. So I know you might say, you said you're going to talk about managing stress and anxiety, and where in the world do you think diet fits in? But I do actually think that diet very much fits in. And I'm not here, I've talked about my diet before, I've talked about the way I eat. So, like I said, none of this are things that you probably haven't heard before if you've been listening for a while. It's not any life shattering things that you've never heard before from anyone. But I do really think that diet is very much tied into the day to day of how you feel. Okay, so just to kind of preface all of this, and maybe kind of let you see why I think that is, I just want you to imagine how you feel after you've eaten your lunch or your dinner, and how does that make you feel? How are you feeling after that? Typically, for many, many years, and I'm not saying this does not happen to me now, but typically, like after I eat, I just feel very sluggish. I thought that was normal. Maybe sometimes that's normal. I don't know. So if we're thinking that food is not connected to the way that we feel, that right there kind of is proof that, at least in the immediate right now, right here, right now, it's connected to how you are feeling physically. Because it can leave you feeling sluggish. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit. There's so many different ways of eating, and I am not here to argue for any one of those ways. I'm going to tell you about me. I'm going to tell you about how I eat. I don't argue this for anybody. I just do what I feel is right for me. And by the way, when it comes to diet changes, you want to talk to a doctor before you change anything. So I'm just telling you my experience. I feel like not just feeling, just it's more than feeling. If you listen to all of the research and the information tied to food and our diet and the American diet, the standard American diet, which a lot of people eat in a lot of countries. So it's not just American, but you see that in a lot of countries now where people are eating processed foods. You don't know what all is in those foods. Packaged foods, boxed foods, bagged foods. It's all manufactured. It no longer resembles what maybe it once resembled in its natural state of being, in its healthier state of being. So when you look at diseases, a lot of them are made worse, or I would argue based on things that I heard, just kidding, but things that doctors are even saying. It's this kind of a diet that can feed into diseases. Like cancer feeds off of sugar. And even if you're someone who's like, well, I don't really eat a whole lot of sugary things, the thing is, processed foods really are packed with sugar. They are really packed with sugar. And it can be from the obvious to the not obvious, like all of those salad dressings, sauces, tons of sugar. And also when we're eating breads, so maybe it's not a sugary treat, but it's bread, it gets broken down as sugar, becomes sugar in the body. So all of these processed foods really are just sugar. And our bodies now, with a standard American diet, our bodies are processing and consuming so much more sugar than human bodies have ever had to deal with in the past. So the standard American diet is not very healthy. By very, I mean not at all. So I would argue to, whatever you believe about foods, just focusing on the more natural. The more that you can stay away from processed foods, the better. the best advice that I've heard regarding, staying away from all the processed foods is just when you go to a supermarket. Um, I don't usually say supermarket, it just came out. When you go to the store and you buy your food, when you go grocery shopping, to just kind of shop the perimeter of the store. Because in the perimeter of the store is where you have actual food. So again, regardless of if you're whatever beliefs you have of diets, you can shop the perimeter and just avoid what you want to avoid. So perimeter, you're going to find the actual meats. You're going to find fruits, vegetables, actual food. So the thing you want to try to focus on is just anything that is real food. Real. It grew this way. It's the least amount of processed as it can possibly be. Now, there's always some amount of processing involved. Even when, like, if you go to cook a steak, you're processing it, you're not eating it raw. So there's going to be a little bit of change in the food, but it's not, it's different from going and buying these packaged foods. That's where there's so much processing. And that's what I think, in my opinion, based on research, that's what we want to try to avoid. So personally, I eat a low carb, high fat diet, and I'm not promoting that for anyone. Like I said, any diet changes, you want to talk to your doctor. You need to look at what works for you, what's healthy for you. But this kind of way of eating for me is very beneficial just because it gives me so much energy, and I don't feel hungry. And also just eating those real foods, I don't get the sluggish feeling when I'm eating foods that are natural and real foods that are low carb and high fat. In fact, I usually don't eat until the afternoon. I usually will quote unquote fast. I don't know. This will not pass the fasting standards of everyone because I do put butter and coconut oil blended in my coffee. So some people would say, well, then you're not really fasting because you're consuming calories, and that could be right to their standard, but all I mean to say is I don't eat solid food until about like 1:30, sometimes not even until 2. And then at that point, I'm eating an egg. Usually, my husband makes us breakfast in the morning, us being me and my daughter. So usually it's like 2 eggs he'll make me, and sometimes sausage to go with it. So that's it. So I'll eat that in the afternoon, and that eggs are very, very filling. And it doesn't leave me feeling sluggish. I have my 2 eggs, the sausage, whatever he's made. And I feel so good. I feel energetic after I've eaten that. I don't feel sluggish, like, oh my goodness, I need to take a nap after these eggs. No, there's none of that. Yeah, so just really kind of focusing on real food that gives you energy and is really feeding your body the nutrients that you need, is going to help you. It's going to help you feel good. So I know these are things that you're probably thinking, this really isn't helping, but I don't know. I know that we know that exercise and diet and sleep are good things, but if we know something and we're not doing it, it's just really, it doesn't do anything. But I'm telling you, these 3 things are huge. They are huge. They're a huge part of why I feel like I'm able to effectively manage the stress and the anxiety in my life. Because life is stressful. Any life you live. We're all just living our own life. But anyone's life is going to be stressful. Even if you have probably the least stressful life. Sorry, I am still sick. This is week 5 now. But anyway, there's always stress. But doing these 3 things are going to make the biggest impact. They really, really are. Okay, so the next couple of things that I'm going to talk about are just, they're still important things, but my feelings are if you do the rest of these things, and you avoid those first three things, you're gonna maybe make a minor difference, if any difference, really. I don't know that you can use other strategies quite effectively if you don't have those first three in place. I really don't. They all go together. The first three need to be in place with anything else. Okay, so other things that I do in my life to help me. I really try to keep a positive attitude. Okay, I know we're probably sick of hearing that, and I know, because I feel the same way when I hear things that I feel I hear all the time, and it's like, please don't ever say that again. So I'm hearing it all the time. But I do try to maintain a positive attitude. I try to be positive in my thinking, and I try to be positive in the way that I speak. And I do this because I honestly believe that our words are powerful. Yes, I believe this. I did an episode on the power of belief, which was a book that I read this past summer, and it really confirmed everything I always believed about how strong our beliefs are. But it's this biologist who talked about the changes that you can make on a cellular level based on your beliefs. So just by believing things negatively, so if I have these negative beliefs, I'm going to affect my cells in a very negative way. But if I have these positive beliefs, I am going to positively affect my cells, because you're creating the environment for your cells. Um, and this is huge, okay? This is huge. And I do believe that our words are powerful, that we can manifest things with our beliefs, with our words. So I really do think that we have to practice caution, and just be very careful in what we're sending out in the world, because I think that we can manifest a lot of things. So maybe this is something that just sounds a little bit kooky, and you're like, yeah, I don't know about that. And that's fine. I understand that that can sound weird, but those are my beliefs. And you will respect that. Just kidding. So those are my beliefs. And aside from, even if you feel like, well, I don't know how about that whole manifestation thing, Tammy, that's fine, and I get it. But just think about, when you go down that rabbit hole of negativity, what happens? More negativity, right? It's like, you just kind of perpetuate this idea that nothing is right, everything is complaint worthy. It's kind of like a domino effect, really. And I think if we pay attention to the patterns in our lives, we know that, right? When you are in the negative funk, and let's just say you've been there for a while. I've been there a couple days now. I've been super negative, and this has happened to me too. So even though I'm someone who really is in general a positive person, believe me when I say I've been down that rabbit hole of negativity. Yes, I have. I've been on that road before, people. I know the scenery. It kind of just perpetuates more negativity. It's like, today I'm being negative and I'm just spewing all these negative things, and then tomorrow I'm doing the same thing. It's very easy that when you get in the habit of doing that, you continue to do it. Kind of like Newton's law of motion, right? It's once you're on that road, you tend to continue down that road, unless you are a little more conscious and you kind of stop yourself and go the opposite way and say, hey, I'm gonna be positive. Then positivity seems to breed more positivity. Like, if you look at things through a positive light, then you tend to look at other things through a positive light, and it just envelops your way of thinking, which then it becomes the lens at which you're looking through everything. It doesn't mean that bad things aren't going to happen. It's just that as you're looking at things, you're looking at it through a little more positive light, and it just makes managing and dealing with the everyday difficult matters, just makes it a little easier, a little bit easier. Okay, the next thing that I think is hugely important is making sure that you have at least someone who you feel comfortable to talk to about things that are going on. And this is more than like, oh, I vent to my spouse. I think that's good too. I think we have to be able to vent. But I mean like someone who can be close to the situation enough, like maybe it's another colleague, someone who can offer you advice, someone who can listen and know enough about the situation to be able to talk to you, or at least be, a good listener. Um, and this could be someone who, yeah, can give you advice, who can give you suggestions, because they would know people, they would know the situations, they would actually be able to offer something valid that could be helpful and useful to you. This is very different than gossiping and going around and talking negatively and spreading negativity. So I want to be clear on that. I'm not talking about go out and spread all this stuff. I'm talking about having someone who you feel comfortable with, who you can share things with, and you do maybe feel comfortable sharing some of the negative feelings that you might sometimes have, and you can talk to them about it. But also just being able to talk about situations and getting advice because they are familiar with your school, with the people, maybe that grade, whatever it is. So this would probably be a colleague. So someone who, you can be maybe a little bit vulnerable with. I know sometimes we like to make it appear that we have all the answers, or I know exactly how to tackle this. But the truth is, every year we're dealing with completely different students than we've ever worked with before. So even if you find yourself in a similar situation, you're working with a different student or a different parent. So even a similar situation is probably going to require something different to be brought to the dinner table, if you will. And I won't, just kidding. So we really don't have it figured out. Similar situations might require a completely different approach, right? I just think any school year you can think about things that, oh, this happened to me this school year that I've never had happen. Every year there's something different, right? So I would say just making sure that you have someone who you feel comfortable, who you can confide in, who's not going to judge you, who's not going to be like, oh, Tammy needs to figure it out because that girl is a hot mess. Okay, moving on. The other thing that I think is really helpful in managing stress and anxiety is making sure that you have something outside of the field of education that you can devote your time to, or that you can just invest energy to help keep your mind off of school, because I don't think it's totally healthy to be thinking about our line of work all hours of the day. Yes, it's a huge part of who we are, what we are. It's so huge. And I get you guys. I so get that it's hard to have that separateness, but I think it's really, really healthy. So having a different hobby, be it, whatever, maybe you're a runner and that would go in part of like the exercise. With me, I'm in a virtual online book club. That's something that I like. That's something that I love. I've always loved reading. I've talked about this before. So even just being part of this book club is nice because it gives me something to look forward to, it gives me something to do, but different kind of hobbies and things that you like. I'm also an avid podcast listener. I almost said listener to, podcast listener. And this is something that I've been doing the last couple of years. And believe it or not, I did not start with education podcasts. I really started listening to fitness and health podcasts, which is what got me interested in eventually starting my own podcast. So I do listen to other education podcasts, but that does not make up the bulk of what I listen to. I'm very, very into health and fitness. No, I'm not like a fitness junkie. I'm not one of those people. But like I mentioned briefly, I do like to kind of go through the ritual of doing my workout, however simple it might be, in the morning. So I do spend a lot of my time listening to podcasts that might be of that genre. I'm also really into like science podcasts. These are nice breaks because it gets me in just kind of thinking about something that's just not education related. And I think it's so important to have that time where you just step away from education momentarily and focus on something else. I also feel like even though I don't totally love cooking, I do because otherwise we would starve. But just actually the ritual of that, coming home, getting in my kitchen, making dinner, making, natural, just real food is something that I enjoy. It's therapeutic. I don't even know that I can say that I enjoy it because I would probably not do it if I had an option. But I do say I do enjoy it in the sense that it's kind of like me unwinding from the busy day from work, and then I will put on a podcast while I'm cooking. And so it's, the actual act of creating something in the kitchen and then listening to something totally unrelated to education. Um, and then my last, this certainly isn't an exhaustive list, but this is kind of getting a little bit long now. So I would say the last thing that I think helps me, and it kind of goes with this last point that we discussed, is really kind of giving yourself a time where you're like, hey, I'm between these hours, I'm not going to work on school things. I'm not going to think about school things. So let's say there's something really pressing at work. You really want to have a time like, hey, these are the hours that I'm going to be working on work related stuff. These are the hours that I'm not going to be working on work related stuff. So for me, I'm really not, I will sometimes go on like teacher websites or I might look things up, but I'm not putting a lot of mental energy into thinking about situations at school, thinking about things that have to be handled. Typically between like from 6 onward, and it might even be more like 5 and onward, which I feel like is probably going to sound really early to a lot of people. But once I get home, and I'm usually home by 5, actually, I'm usually home a little bit before 5, but by 5, I'm typically here. And then I'm not going to spend too much time at that point. I go home, I get dinner ready, and then I'm kind of done dealing with specific school related things. So once in a while there might be something that's pressing and I have to, but I think just having kind of that cutoff time is super helpful and healthy. So yeah, just have a cutoff time and just be, just know that this is the time I'm not gonna to deal with it. On that same note, it's also a good idea to have specific times that you do specific things, like specific times of the day that you're checking email, specific times of the day that you're allowing yourself to confront those issues, because we don't want to ignore it, but we certainly don't want to be dealing with the same things at every hour of every day, because that's where it starts becoming a little intense. So I just, like, I will actually check my email off and on throughout the day. But my big times is definitely the first thing I do when I get in the classroom. Is that's kind of like my email checking time. And then the end of the day, my email checking time. Oh, and also when my kids have their Spanish class, my email checking time. So I'm making sure that I'm checking it during those times of the day, and that's when I'm dealing with it. And then, of course, if you have any big pressing things, you might want to be like, hey, these are the hours that I, get this done. So that's kind of helpful. Again, it kind of goes back to scheduling, and schedules for me just work. Okay, I know I said that was the last one, but I want to actually include something that I've been doing recently that is, I think, helpful, even if it's only in my mind. We have recently gotten an essential oil diffuser, and I don't know, like I said, this could all be in my mind, but I just like having that fragrance. I just feel like it really relaxes me. And my daughter, who is in high school, she's been actually sleeping with the diffuser in her room. She's in high school, so she's, that's high school these days are so stressful. It's really kind of sad how stressful it's become, but any case, yeah, so she's been sleeping with it, and she's been finding that a very, very useful. So regardless of your feelings on that, I'm just saying, for me, having this diffuser, it just, I don't know, it just creates such a nice calming atmosphere. So even if your calming atmosphere is something different, but it's an atmosphere where you can really unwind and you can really relax and just experience, moments of not so high intensity. If it's maybe just lighting candles, I don't know what that would look like for you, but I know for me, creating an atmosphere where I really can feel like I'm relaxed and calm is helped by this diffuser. So I wanted to add that because that's something that's been a little more recent in my life, and you definitely haven't heard me talk about that before because, like I said, it's recent in my life. Never talked about that before. All right, so this episode's already longer than I had anticipated, so let's go ahead and move on to the wins and fails segment. Win for the week is, at the time of this recording, I'm at the end of my Thanksgiving break, so I had a whole week off. That is a win. I don't know, it's always amazing to sleep in. It's always amazing to have nothing on your to-do list. It's a little sad that this can't always be reality. But, I guess it's kind of good because I'm unproductive when I have nothing to do. So it works for me to have something to do. So that's my win. I am very relaxed. I am just feeling very positive. And yeah, I'm going to go into this new week, just on fire, as they say. Just kidding. I don't think anyone says that. I think maybe I'm the only one who says that. And then fail for the week. There's really no fail. It's been an amazing week. The only fail is that I'm not going to be able to sleep in anymore. I get about 4:30 in the morning, and it's not easy being cheesy or getting up at 4:30 in the morning. So I'm going to miss that. I'm 4:30. I'm about to see you again. I have not missed you. I've really enjoyed. I've been getting up like around 6ish. So for me, that's sleeping in, people. That is sleeping in. Today I slept in until 8. That was really sleeping in. But that always happens at the end of a vacation. I start sleeping in a little bit longer as, I'm kind of acclimating to the schedule of vacation. But with only a week, there's not, it doesn't really give you too much time to adjust. But anyway, that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. I know that our listening options are many. So I just really appreciate you taking time to listen to little old me. Again, if you have anything you'd like to add to this list of ways to manage and deal with anxiety and stress, I'd love to hear from you. Even if you just want to give me a shout out, whatever. I can be reached on Twitter at TammyJ. That's TAMIJ123. Until next time.
Wait a minute. Wait 1 minute. Before you go, don't forget you can catch our show notes online at www.timetoteach.libsyn. That's libsyn.com. We're also on Facebook at Time to Teach. Don't forget to check out our Facebook group, Teachers for Effective Curriculum. And if you're an educator with your own podcast show, I invite you to join our brand new Facebook group, Teachers Who Podcast. Let's grow a community where we can network, problem solve, and discuss anything and everything podcast related. I'll see you there.